Row house. It's actually a townhouse in the federal style. Turned about 200 years old, and our family's lived in it for about 50 years. All of the original architectural components are still in very good shape, but after 2 centuries of active family living, actually the first family had 8 children living in the house. It needed a bit of restoration. It's a historically significant house. Joseph Jefferson was the first owner of this house. He's a famous early American actor, and Robert Purvis owned the house. He was a prominent Civil War abolitionist. Over the past 50 years, our family has hired well-intentioned but ill-informed contractors to do some minor but necessary work. And restoring an old building to its original condition takes a lot of in-depth knowledge, patience, time, and skill. And we were frustrated in our search to find someone who had these qualities. But then we saw a new group working on a house down here, the Thaddeus Kosciuszko House. It's a national landmark that's administered by the National Park Service. And then we found out it was Historic Restorations that was doing the job. So we did a bunch of research, and we found out that they did major work on the Peterson House. That's a house down in Washington where Lincoln died. It's also a national landmark. And they did work on St. John's Episcopal Church in Maryland. That church was built at exactly the same time as our house. So maybe we finally found someone who knew what they were doing. However, federal government policy dictates that federal employees are not allowed to recommend or even comment on any private contractors. But we had some informal contacts with the federal government employees, and off the record, they told us about the quality of the Historic Restorations work, and they told us the quality was excellent, and they had a great work ethic. And our contacts were absolutely correct. Also, we could tell from the uninterrupted work down there on the Kosciuszko House that Historic Restorations knew how to deal with governmental bureaucracy, and in Philadelphia, that can be quite a challenge. So, before we got started, we discussed and prioritized our work with Chuck, who was right over here, and listening to make sure that I say everything properly. Chuck and I agreed on a written proposal, and then Chuck and his fellow craftsmen, he brought a bunch of fellow craftsmen with him. They worked on the exterior front and the rear of the house, from the top to the bottom, and you can see they're still working on the roof. They're completely replacing the whole roof, and the back has a porch where they've reconstructed a metal roof. He also did stucco, and he restored the brickwork, including the bricks, and they have restored the cornices also way up top, which you can't see. We didn't know actually that metal roofs were used in existence 200 years ago. A previous contractor, who we didn't hire, told us that the windowsills were so rotten and so soft that they had to be completely replaced. And this would have been a huge effort because, as you can see, the windowsill is just one big piece. But Chuck came in and he removed all 200 years of the paint. And by the way, they are also very careful with removal of lead-based paint. And he showed us the original frame, and he showed us the original sills. They held up so well that they were as hard as the day they were put in 200 years ago. And you could still smell, he brought me over, and you could still smell and see the distinctive yellow pine sap that was the original construction of the windowsills and the frames. To restore the windows themselves, Chuck removed them, and he took them to his shop in Lancaster for repairs and for new glass. Actually, it's old-looking glass with the ripples in it. And then his craftsmen reinstalled the windows into the frames. With everything they did, they took great pains to be historically accurate to the smallest detail. The painting, the shutter hardware, the bricks, and even the mortar that he did between the bricks. These were the smallest details that had to be approved by, in every particular, by a very particular historical commission here in Philadelphia. And Lois, with her experience on the Lancaster City Historical Commission, and Danielle, with her patience and perseverance, worked very hard to get all of the approvals from the Historical Commission for even down to the mortar. Through the entire project, they kept us well informed. They kept me and my wife well informed. They arrived early. They worked steadily. Sometimes they came early in the morning and worked into the evening or on a weekend, and they cleaned up thoroughly at the end of every day. And they all seemed to enjoy everything that they were doing every day. So we've lived here for about 50 years, and my wife and I thought we knew just about everything about our house and about early 19th century lifestyles. But while Chuck was working, he explained to us things that had puzzled us, and he explained them in simple language. And it was language that we could understand. Things like strange-looking antique hardware, whether it was on the windows or inside the house, or man-made holes in odd places. We already knew where all of the 19th century rat and mouse holes were. So these were man-made holes, definitely. And it gave us insight into the ingenuity, everything that he told us. It gave us insight into the ingenuity of our ancestors to solve the problems that they had for lighting, personal comfort, home security, and so forth. And on a couple of walks around our neighborhood, Chuck's conversations with me showed his in-depth knowledge of many historical American building styles. It wasn't just the Federal style, but things like the Georgian styles and the Italianate styles and things like that. And he always welcomed the inquisitiveness of us and our two very large, in-your-face dogs. I don't know if they had dog houses 200 years ago, but I'll have to ask him. Chuck, did they have dog houses 200 years ago?
Yeah.
Yes, they did. Okay. So, in addition to the historically accurate, excellent quality of their work and the great work ethic that I mentioned before, I would add that everyone involved with the organization, the Historic Restorations Organization, is friendly and courteous, and they work well with difficult bureaucrats. And the care they put into our restoration here increased even more our appreciation and love for our old house. I would like to say that the people of Historic Restorations truly care about proper preservation of America's historical architectural heritage.